Alright, so this is going to be part 8 to what if Asta and Yuno were adopted by Meroleona. So with that being said, let's just roll the intro.
Bow in the presence of greatness. Cause right now that has forsaken us. You should be honored by my lateness. That I would even show up to this fake shit. So go ahead, go nuts, go.
Alright, so in the last part we had just gotten done with Licht or Patri arriving and him basically taking Sally back and him about to fight Yuno and Asta. So at this point, Asta and Yuno can tell that this person in front of them is incredibly strong. Patri is at the time one of the strongest characters to be shown, so he's rather impressive to both of them. Now with Teresa and Ghosh going back to the church, this is where they would go to call for reinforcements, but at this time it'll still take Seke some time to get to the Black Bulls, which is the closest to the town. After that, this is where Yuno tells Asta, "I've been saving this for you," that being his newest spell, and that being the Spirit Dive. So he activates Spirit Dive, this being the first form of it, so it's not going to be super strong like it was during the tournament arc, but it will be really close as he's been training with it, and him as a character is a lot stronger than he was in canon just because of how he's been raised by Meroleona. So that being said, Asta follows suit and transforms into his Black Asta form and decides to fight with Yuno. With both brothers fighting side by side, it's rather hard for Patri to even get some leeway in. Although he is a lot faster than both of them, with Asta not being able to be sensed, it's really hard for him to dodge him, as he could be attacked by Yuno and Asta could come from the back and slice him. Now with his master being in trouble, Valtos, the one with the spatial magic, tries to help out by shooting some projectiles from different portals to get Asta and Yuno. With this, Asta decides to take out Valtos first, as he is something that neither of them can really predict as they're fighting Licht. So he really does so easily, as there's nothing Valtos can do against Black Asta. Patri would try to help, but with Yuno going against them, it's not really going to be able to do that, as Yuno himself is pretty fast in his Spirit Dive form. Now we get to a point where they push Patri too far and he decides to use his Light Whip. With this, he starts smashing all around and the cave starts to collapse onto itself. But Asta's able to cut the whip to stop the spell, but again, the rubble from different parts of the cave would fall down. But Yuno would use his wind magic to push the rubble away from them, letting them be safe. Now this fight isn't completely one-sided, as both would get pretty good hits on each other, that being both sides, with Asta already being kind of injured from before, and Patri, well, getting hit by both Asta and Yuno. Now Asta doesn't obviously take away all of his magic, as that's not really what the swords do, so he would still have a large amount of magical reserves. So Patri decides to end it all here, and he decides to use one of his ultimate spells. But before he does so, he obviously heals all of his wounds that he's got to this point, making both Asta and Yuno rather upset. So the spell that he uses is Light Shaft of Divine Punishment. This is the giant kind of beam of light that he uses against Yami and the others. Now with Asta, he doesn't know whether or not his swords will actually defend this, but he tries anyways. Now he uses his Black Divider on this attack, being able to reflect it. And yes, I know this might seem a bit, I guess, weird, or the scaling might not sound right, but I believe it would still work, as not only is he in black form, but he also has the Black Divider here, albeit being the first version of it, which he was able to use against the same attack against a stronger Patri. So it makes sense here, especially since Patri is also being restricted due to the spell that the Eye of the Midnight Sun has him under. So he would be reflected, and this is where the rest of the Midnight Sun would come, and Asta and Yuno would start to lose steam at this point, as they've been fighting for so long. At this point, this is where Yami would come in with Finral because they are, well, the closest ones to the town. Yami would do a quick puff from his cigarette as he sees the destruction which had happened when he was not there. He looks at both Yuno and Asta and says, "So, you're the Vermilion brothers. And who is that?" Pointing at, well, Partry. Asta would tell Yami that is the leader of the Midnight Sun. This is when Yami's eyes would widen. Yami, walking up to Partry, would say, "Well, damn, you kids might not be actual royals by blood, but you at least fight like them." He says this given the fact that they are extremely strong. As Yami tries to put a binding spell on Partry, this is when the third eye arrives, using Raya's copy magic to basically use spatial magic to get there. Once there, Licht or Partry explains what each member means. So Raya, the disloyal, Fauna, the hateful, and Veto of despair. Yami then cracks his neck and sighs a bit and says, "Man, I thought this was going to be a quick job, but I guess I'm going to have to fight." This is when Asta and Yuno are ready to fight with him, and he tells them, No, you kids have done enough. Just protect my ride," pointing at Finral. Finral obviously is upset by this. Yami then proceeds to fight all of the Midnight Sun, or at least the third eye. Now, obviously Yami isn't as tired as he was in canon. He's pretty much at peak performance, or at least around that. With him not having to fight Partry earlier, it gives him a lot more stamina, and, well, a better chance of actually fighting them on. Because of this, Raya isn't able to copy his magic, and therefore does not have his dark magic. So Yami does actually have a hard time fighting the third eye, as at this time he was around Partry's level, who at the time was under a spell that restricted his power, and because of this, the third eye were stronger than Partry. So that would mean that they were also stronger than Yami. That being said, it's not like Yami's going down without a fight. Even when he was weakened in canon, he was still able to keep up somewhat of a good defense against them. So that's what Yami is doing. He knows that he can't really take three of them on, as they are just as powerful, or more powerful than Partry, I should say, who Yami would tell is a incredible wizard, as he could sense the mana coming off of the fight from earlier. But the best thing he could do right now is to defend everyone and hope for reinforcements, which are coming. Now, the reason why Asta and Yuno aren't joining is like what I said before. They took out Partry, and this really wasted a lot of their magic and stamina, which they really need to fight. So they're pretty much out of juice, to say it simply. So the third eye wouldn't really make this a fair fight, as each of them would try to get in and hurt Yami. None of them have this sense of loyalty to a fight, so it would make sense, especially those like Raya, which is literally in his name with disloyal, and Fauna with, hateful. So it makes sense. It would start off with Raya shooting light towards Yami, and Yami having to defend it with his sword. Then Veto would come in. He would then try to hit Yami in the side, but Yami would try to slash him. But Veto, having this kind of sense of ki, like Asta, because of how he is more animalistic, is able to dodge Yami and hit him on the side. And this is where Fauna actually blasts him with a salamander's blast, as right now she has the spirit. Asta, not wanting to get Yami hurt, actually decides to join in and tries to reflect some of the stuff back at the attackers, but again, he's not in his black form, so it's going to be a lot harder to do so. He does have some level of ki sensing, so he's able to defend Yami somewhat well, but a lot of the attacks are just too fast for him to react, such as the light attacks and people like Veto charging in. Not wanting to stand by either, Yuno would jump in as well, using his wind magic to negate some of the attacks from Fauna, but he is running out of juice. Not completely, but he can't really keep up that will of defense. So the three would split up to fight each third eye individually, with Yuno against Fauna, Asta versus Raya, and Yami versus Veto. It's not really going well for all three of them, as the difference in power is a little bit too much, and at this point Yami is getting a bit comfortable going against Veto, as he doesn't have to worry about the two other third eyes fighting back. So them going against each other is somewhat relatively even, while Asta and Yuno have somewhat of a difficult time, as Raya has so many different spells, but with Asta having the two swords, it's really easy to defend himself. So Asta's on the defensive, and so is Yuno, while Yami is going more on the offensive side. It's only until a few minutes later until the rest of the reinforcements come in, that being the captains, one being the Silver Eagles captain, the others being the Green Praying Mantises, and the Blue Rose Knights. With this, Yami and the other two, that being Asta and Yuno, can rest up as the captains go against the third eye. Yami's kind of annoyed at this, as he wanted to continue fighting but sees that he might not win that fight. He lets the captains fight for him, as he needs that rest. Then he notices Partry is basically by himself, and he devises a plan with Asta, as Asta can't be sensed through normal magic sensing. Yuno wants to be a part of this, but Yami tells him that he can't, as he will be detected by Partry, or the leader, as he doesn't really know his name just yet. So Yami tries to attack Partry, which Partry tries to defend himself, as he knows where Yami's gonna be using his magic sensing. Asta comes behind him and slices him. This causes the seal on Partry to be opened, releasing his power. With this sudden events, the third eye stop and perform the sealing magic again, and since they can't defend Partry while also fighting these captains, so they leave using Raya's copy magic to copy Valto's spatial magic, and they just get out of there. So they report to the captains what had happened, and this is mostly coming from Yuno and Asta, as they were there the longest, and some of Teresa's statements as well. The captains are shocked that they were even able to go against these people, as these are rookies, and well, Yami, he's not really impressive to the other captains, as he's a foreigner and he has the worst Magic Knight squad, but they give him respect for this one time. After this, they go back to the church and they see that everyone's basically healed up, and it seems to be a happy ending, although the snow mage from earlier does have to work at the church to atone for what he had done. So now let's talk about how Asta not being in Black Bulls would affect how the team would function and all the relationships going forward. Now I'm not going to talk about this for too long, as I'm going to go into the next arc a little bit into it, and then I'm going to stop there, I believe, depending on how long this video is going to be. I'm trying to make it a bit longer, but you know how it is. So with Asta not being there, it's going to change the team dramatically. Now everyone has this assumption that the Black Bulls are just one of the best squads and are just super good, just underrated. Now that is the case to some extent, but with Asta not being there, it changes it from being one of the better ones to one of the worst, and the reason for that is because of complacency. And what I mean by that is Asta is the one who pushes everyone forward so that they could do better. Just think about it. Like one of the first examples, Noelle, how she gets along with everyone because of Asta being there. She's able to grow as a person because of that. From being some snobby royal to someone that can appreciate those who are kind to her, those who are of lower class than her. Second example, Luck. Luck had a bad tendency to fight by himself, and because Asta's there, he starts to fight with his friends more often. Now you could go down the list of everyone in the Black Bulls being inspired by Asta to become a better person and become a stronger mage. It's just a natural progression of how everyone is, but with Asta being the one who pushes them forward. So without Asta, complacency sets in and their growth is stunted, if that makes sense. Now it wouldn't completely stop, as Noelle is there to basically order them, as Yami doesn't really do so, but it's not really the same, and although she is there, it's not like they instantly listen to her or want to, like Asta was in the past. So the growth is slowed down quite a bit. Now this is going to be important later on when it comes to Asta and the Black Wolves, but yeah. So going back into the story, Asta would go back into town, and this is where Rebecca, noticing that Asta was the one who saved her, siblings, would thank him, and he would just be like, well, it's just nothing, I'm just doing my job. And this is where she would get to know him and develop feelings possibly. After that, we could skip a few days to where the Wizard King is asking Asta to go to the capital for some important business. As you remember, during the attack on the capital prior, they were able to capture some Midnight Sun members. Asta is basically here to unlock the seal that's on their memories using his anti-magic, which he does, and finds out who the traitor is. Now this meeting between the captains isn't too different from in canon, as it really wouldn't be, except for the fact that Meroleona is there as the captain of the Crimson Lions instead of Frigolion, who was obviously absent because of his injuries. Now with her being there, she's able to keep everyone under control as Frigolion did in the past, but with her being there, she's obviously a more aggressive person when it comes to it. But just like in canon, they found out that the Purple Orca's captain was the one who was the traitor. So we could skip ahead a bit as nothing really changes at this point, and we could get to the point where Yami is asked by the Wizard King to go on a special mission. Now this is for the underwater dungeon, but it's not just Yami that's being brought in for this mission, but also Meroleona. Now in canon, the Wizard King only asked Yami as he knew he would not betray the kingdom, and that's because there is a traitor within the Magic Knights. He was scared to make this a public matter. Now it would make sense that he would also ask the royal families to help, as they would be the ones that are most loyal to the kingdom, as they have an incentive to be so, obviously being royals. Now the reason why they asked Meroleona is because there'd be no way that she'd be a traitor, and because of a certain character on her squad, that being Asta, that could help on the way because of his anti-magic. And the reason why Yami's being asked is because of his water mage that he has on his team, that being Noelle. And the Wizard King can see the potential, as not only is she the daughter to Acer, if I remember her name right, that being the mother, but she also has a tremendous amount of magical power. So these two are tasked on trying to get into the underwater lair. So on the day of the trip, Meroleona doesn't want to bring too many people onto this mission, as it's still going to be somewhat secretive. So she just brings Asta. Now this would make Leo very upset, as he's trying to prove himself that he's strong and that he can, surpass his family, that being Meroleona and his brother Frigolion in specific. Not only that, but Asta is also his rival. So to see this kind of transpire, it's even more damaging to him. But Meroleona would go and talk to him and tell him while they're gone to gain as many golden stars as you can to prove that you're worth taking on the next trip. So this would be the thing that motivates Leo to continue fighting on when there seems to be no reason to. So with that being said, they go on their trip. Now Yami would take the usual bunch that he does, basically the entire squad minus Gordon, and obviously characters that were not introduced yet. So when they get there, they have their fun for a bit until it's time to get serious. Yami says that it's not a vacation, that they're here for actual work. They're not really informed too much at first what they're doing there, but as the day goes on, they are. They're told that they need to get to this underwater dungeon, and that they need to do it within this time, as the mana zone that's around it is pretty weak at the time. and that's where Noelle comes into play. She is tasked on creating the spell that will help them travel through the barrier there. Noelle sees this as almost an impossible task, as she has the least amount of magic control out of the group, and she's always had a struggle controlling her magic, so if anything goes wrong, she could end up killing everyone there. But over the week of this happening, Noelle would try her best over and over, and it wouldn't really seem to work. Asta in his time would also start training, as he wants to keep up his physical strength. Now this is also around the time where they meet a character named Kahano. This is the girl that has song magic. She meets both Asta and Noelle, and even offers to heal Asta's injuries or his fatigueness for a small price. Now with her being there, she gives advice to Noelle, talking about how although she has a lot of magical power, it's not being used very well, as she's restricting herself. Because of the stress that she's putting herself through, it's messing up her spells, and she tells her to go all out. Noelle says that it's too dangerous, that she'll end up consumed by her own magic. But Asta is there and tells her that everything will be fine, just let loose, and if anything happens, he'll be there to nullify any of the effects. So she decides to do that. She creates a spell that she would use later on, and it seems to go well, but then as she remembers all the dark memories that she's had in the past, it starts to mess her up, and it almost engulfs her in her own magic. But this is when the Black Bulls come out to help her, as she remembers more and more memories that she's had with the Black Bulls, although not as profound or as many. If Asta wasn't there, they're still there for support, and it helps her, be better. So with this, she's able to control the spell, and she creates the Sea Dragon's Cradle, if I remember right. So that's where she actually finishes and polishes the spell. With this, Noelle tries to say thank you to Kahano, but she's not there, seemingly disappeared. So we could skip a few hours, and this is when the group is ready to go. So, like I said before, it's going to be Meroleona and Asta from the Lion Kings, and then it's going to be the same cast from the original arc, that being from the Black Bulls. Now, it would happen just the same as it would normally, with Asta being the one who helps cut the barrier and lets the others go through. There, at the underwater temple, this is where they find the sea people. They're welcome as guests, as there hasn't been many people who've gone there in a long time. This is where they get to meet the Elder, and they talk about the magic stones that's in his possession. Once they go to the Elder's temple, this is where he does a little game with the magic knights. Whoever outlasts the other will get the magic stone. So it's gonna be just like it was in canon, where the group basically has to fight a member of the sea people and see who outlasts each other. So just like in canon, the captains will not participate, so Meroleona and Yami will be with the Elder looking at the different fights. So with that being said, this is going to be the end of the video. I hope you guys like it. Recently, if you kept up with my channel, it was hacked a few days ago, or about a week from me posting this, and it was a very stressful time. And if you want to keep up with, news, and if one day you don't see my channel up again, that might be why. It might be terminated again or hacked. So make sure you follow me on different medias, such as my Twitter, Discord, or even Patreon, as those will be the first platforms to know about it. Mostly my Discord and Patreon, but anyways, I gotta just say that just so you guys know. I appreciate anyone who helped me during this time. Like I said before, I'm not sure about everyone who shouted me out during the time, but anyways, with that being said, just know that's a possibility. So with that being said, I know I said that already, but I gotta give a shout out to the patrons over on Patreon. We actually have a new member in our gold tier. So just so you guys know, if you guys want to support me in other ways other than just watch my videos, you can by joining the Patreon. It'll be linked in the description, or you could go to patreon.com/ComicSansTheMan, and there you could just sign up for $1 and you get my videos early, and you have a chance to get a drawing from me, or you could support me in higher tiers and have a greater chance of getting my drawings, and you're not limited to the 1:1 ratio that I use for the lower tier drawings. So with that being said, let's shout it out. So we have Nippy Director, Kenny, Dwayne Fenn, and Lyco. So if you want to join them, like I said before, it'll be linked in the description. And with that being said, let's just end the video. So yeah.